As we celebrate democracy and freedom today, it is important to realize that free expression can rest literally on the head of a pen.
This is the story of how a group of women defied a dictatorship. They were armed only with scraps of cloth, sewing needles, and the overwhelming desire to find their sons, husbands, and brothers who had been arrested, tortured, and disappeared by a military junta in Chile. 2 decades later, these women are still searching, and the patchwork tapestries that they created out of their anguish have become a handmade chronicle of life in a dictatorship.
Here to accept are producer Les Harris and writer-director of Threads of Hope, Andrew Johnston.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the jury for honoring us. This particular story was a story of women helping women. And it is a powerful story, and we do hope that it will be shown at some point on an American network. I'd like to thank a number of people, but to start with, I'd like to thank the TV Ontario network in Ontario, Canada, who helped support this project. I'd like to thank a lady in the audience here, Marjorie Agassiz, who's a poet and a writer, a Chilean who now lives here in the United States, who wrote a book called Scraps of Life, and that book told the same story as our film. And it was that book and her help that allowed us to make the film we made. I'd like to thank Jane Harris, executive producer, also my wife, Donald Sutherland, who kindly agreed to do the narration for us, Hernan Morris, the cameraman, who himself managed to escape from Chile by climbing over an embassy wall. He lost his brother. He was one of the ones killed. And finally, most of all, I'd like to thank my colleague Andrew Johnston, who's been with me for 8 or 9 years, and in fact had just left Canamedia, and I had to call him in at the last moment, and he just did such a wonderful job directing this film. Andrew.
I just want to say most of all that this award is a tribute to a group of women in Santiago, Chile, who've spent 20 years looking for their brothers, their sons, their husbands, who were disappeared, quote unquote, after the coup in Chile. They're still looking, most of them. They're still asking, why did it happen? They still want justice to be done, and they want the remains of those loved ones, if they're not alive, which they aren't, I think. They want those remains so they can bury them. But most of all, they took on a military dictatorship armed with sewing needles, armed with their own creativity, and they've touched the lives of thousands of people and women all over the world. In their own country, they're being ignored and forgotten. So on their behalf, I say thank you, muchas gracias.